Very much, Dr. Murthy. Thank you for giving us a very big picture of the work and the initiatives of IUC. We also look forward to the NBS session tomorrow. Well, before we go to the next session, may I kindly request all our speakers and participants to open your video. Let's have a group shot for the opening session. Please, all the speakers and participants, turn on your camera. Let's have a group shot virtually. Thank you very much. Yes, wonderful. Also, Stefan has to run for another session. But thank you, Stefan, for wonderfully leading the opening, and a great appreciation go to our honorable speakers, Stefanos, Mr. Huang, Dr. Murthy, Professor Talas, as well as Mr. Steele. Well, now you will hear great insights live from our distinguished keynote speakers. Mr. Arab Habala, Senior Sustainability Expert, former Chief of Sustainable Consumption and Production of UNEP, will chair the keynote session to expand on the policies, approaches, models, and practices towards resilient, carbon neutral, and nature positive cities. Arab, are you there?
Yes.
Yes, you have the virtual space. Hand over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. We have a challenging topic ahead of us, where I would like to highlight the few key words that are on the title, and I would hope that all the speakers will refer to them in their keynote speech. We are here to work together. I'm taking word from the title, for a shared safer, greener, urban future, resilient, carbon neutral, nature positive cities. This forum happens at the right moment, 4 weeks after the COP27 that was discussing about the challenges of climate change and opportunities for action. And at the same time, we're having currently ongoing the COP15 on biodiversity. And in both of those COPs, the cities have an extremely important role to play. And urban development, if done unsustainably, which is generally the case, as we have been hearing, is one of the main drivers of climate change and biodiversity loss. Building with nature is a more sustainable and cost-effective alternative. Still, we are not there, because our building business as usual is contributing to climate disasters and is contributing to biodiversity loss. So we need to turn upside down this formula that is not the right one. So please, dear speakers, if not your main focus, at least reflect on the challenges and opportunities for solutions related to the two major crises for humanity: climate change and biodiversity loss. We have 6 speakers with us. I have asked them, if possible, to speak within 12 minutes so that we could have at least the opportunity for a question. Let me start with Professor Jan Jael, renowned architect, urban planner, and designer, founder and senior advisor of Gale Architects. Jan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Does it work?
Yes, we can hear you.
It's fine. I would like to show my presentation in the form of a PowerPoint presentation, and I will go on to share my screen. Can you see the screen?
Perfect. Go on, please.
We'll go on. I will talk about people in cities, the people dimension in city planning, and I will talk about the importance of putting people first in your considerations. And we will be starting now. We are all working for the same client. It's a walking creature, and it has a great interest in fellow man in other cities. But the problem really is that we have treated this client very badly for quite many years. There's been two very dominating planning paradigms, at least for the past 50 years, who both of them did everything to chase people out of the public spaces. That was the architectural ideology of modernism, and that was the invasion of motor cars. Before the modernism, all the cities were made up of spaces where all the life of the cities were going on, and the buildings were not dominant. It was sort of addressing the spaces. If we look at old cities, we always can remember that all the spaces, and maybe we can remember 2, 3 buildings, the cathedral, the town hall, the king's castle, whatever, all the buildings, other buildings were quite anonymous. With the modernism, the whole thing shifted, the whole focus shifted from the spaces for people to the objects, to the buildings, and whatever was not built upon was leftover space. In the new cities, we do not remember any spaces at all because there are none, but what we remember are increasingly funny buildings made on this focus on the objects rather than the spaces for people. The result of these two developments have been a goodbye to human scale. In the old days, we had human scale settlements. Now people are floating in leftover space. And also the result being a goodbye to the concern for people always shown in settlements throughout history until modernism, and also a concern for social life has been left out in the open air, and people are just floating around. The other thing which happened in the same has been the car invasion. The cars took over the spaces all over the world, and everything was done to make the cars happy. And again, the people of the cities and the life of the cities were chased out of the public spaces. People are treated very badly in cities in all corners of the world. And especially the situation is serious in the developing countries of this world. Also with the car came another blow to human scale. That was the 60 km/h scale, where instead of intimate 5 km/h architecture, we started to have 60 km/h architecture, big spaces, big signs, no people, no details, no intimacy, no fun. What was known about quality for people by the time these two big transformations really took on, that was in 1960, we knew virtually nothing. I was trained as an architect in the 50s, and we were told repeatedly that it doesn't matter what you build because people will adapt and the built form will not influence the quality of life for people. That was what we were told. If it looked good from the air, it would be good to live in. Then I married a psychologist, and then in my life, I had a lot of good discussions with fellow psychologists, fellow teachers, and fellow architects, and all the psychologists would always say, why are you architects not interested in people? Why don't they teach you anything about people in School of Architecture? In my case, I had to go back to School of Architecture 40 more years to try to find out that they didn't know a thing. They could not teach anything they didn't know. We had to start from square one to study how does the built form influence the social life of people. In this course of this research, I wrote some 7 books. They're out in 49 languages. And I always say that by doing research and writing books, you can change the mindset. People can be inspired to think in another way. And if they think in another way, there is a basis for changing the way you plan the cities and the settlements. The research has now gone on all over the world in many corners for 50 years. And actually, starting with Jane Jacobs in 1961, we now know quite much about how to make fine cities and fine settlements for people, respecting people. And also we know some of the things we found out. Certainly what we built influenced our life. We form the cities, but then the cities form us. We form the buildings, but then the way the buildings are organized, they really form the way we can live. We know that we can make spaces which people hate and they gallop out of them as fast as they can, or we can make space where people would like to linger, and they may even come from all over the city to join other fellow citizens in these particular spaces. Now we are in 2022, and in many ways the winds have changed, and many of these things I talk about, they are widely understood, and most mayors in the world I know of, they would like to have a lively, livable city. They need to have a sustainable city. They would like to have a city which invites for healthy lifestyles. And also it has to be a good city to be old in. This first thing, the lively, livable city, that is the age-old thing of public space, that we have in the public space always in history had the chance to meet our fellow citizens and see what society we are part of and see the daily doings. And also we should realize that attraction number 1 in our human lives and in the city is actually people. There's nothing more interesting than people. We also now know for sure that we have to do much more to have a sustainable city. And one aspect is that the more we walk, the more we cycle, the more we use public transportation, the better for the climate. Furthermore, now the doctors tell us that for 50 years, we made cities which invited people to sit. We've had a serious illness called the sitting syndrome, which makes it essential in city planning that we invite people to move more and sit less. Finally, I'll mention another more recent development is that we have an increasing number of elderly people in our society who may have 15, 20, 25 years between retirement and between when they cannot survive anymore. And these people have a lot of good days and a lot of good years, but they need a very good public environment where they can go the 10,000 steps the doctor asks them to do to keep active. This is a very much important new demand, but actually if we make better cities for the elderly, they are also better for the children and they're better for everyone. Summing up, if we look carefully after people in city planning, we will efficiently address these 4 issues. We'll get more livable, more sustainable, more healthy, and more good cities to be old in. But we have to look at the people and make sure they can have a good time as Homo sapiens in their settlements. The wind is changing. People-oriented city planning principles, they are being used now in more and more cities across the world. And good conditions for walking, public life, and bicycling are increasingly seen as elementary human rights. After having done all this research, I've been involved in many projects to carry out the ideas in real life, in small cities, in big cities. One example being the reconquering of Times Square so that now people can enjoy, and it is now a square and not a traffic roundabout. In Sydney, we have worked hard to get the cars and buses out of the central cities, which are now for pedestrians, for bicycles, and for light rail. In a country like Oman, we have worked with with introducing public spaces so that it's not the world of the cars or not caring, but now it has got places where you can have access to meet your fellow citizens. And first and foremost, Copenhagen, my hometown, where we've done all the studies, and we've used Copenhagen as the laboratory throughout, and it's had a very strong effect on Copenhagen. And actually, for 60 years, they have now had a people-first policy in Copenhagen, which have made Copenhagen a very outstanding and very livable city. Here is a map showing the areas reserved for people and pedestrians in 1962 and in 2022. There's been a fantastic change, but also there are now much more people walking, much more public life, because they've invited people to enjoy the city. Also, they've invited bicycles. They made a very extensive bicycle system, and by now we are up towards 50% of everybody. They go to work and studies on their bicycles in the city of Copenhagen. I shall end now by saying that if we put people first in city planning, that relates directly back to who we are and what we are made for. The little walking animal. The biggest day in our life is when we can stand on our feet and start to walk. Life, all the rest of the life, all the important things happens when you are walking, when you're on your feet. The client is a slow, linear, horizontal, 5 kilometers an hour walking creature with this great interest in people. So in conclusion, people city as first priority. It is by far the simplest and cheapest you can do in city planning. No big infrastructure. It creates better cities for all categories of people in society. And it is for cities in all parts of the world. And you can start tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Jan, for this very interesting and very positive presentation. You seem to be very optimistic on making the cities for people. You know very well that this is not the case, unfortunately, in most cities. I mean, Copenhagen is effectively an outstanding city. I know it very well. I know the cases that you have referred to where there were improving spaces for humans. But generally speaking, all around the world, this is not the case, and it's rather the opposite that is going around. So from your perspective, as an architect who has written, who knows so much about it, who have seen so much around you, how can we effectively make the cities be more people-oriented? When I'm referring to the big cities in Africa and in Asia, which will be driving tomorrow the climate change agenda. In 2010, we had the Better City, Better Life Summit in Shanghai, which was really showing what we can do. Things has not improved so far. I refer to COP27 and COP15, and we want to make cities greener, more resilient, and so on. But we remain very much on speeches. So please, from your experience, being optimistic, just be realistic. What can be done in big cities like Delhi, Mumbai, Shanghai, Lagos, and so on?
I think I have mentioned it already. I think that first we will have to change the mindset, the way the politicians and the planners and architects and developers, they look upon, they had to have the knowledge about what they should do. So we have to work with the research, with the communication of the research, the results of the research, and then we can apply them. I have worked now as an architect for 62 years, and I've been through the whole circle, doing a lot of research, making books, and then applying it. And I'm an optimist because I've seen so many places and so many mindsets changing. And I'm pointing out that it's the cheapest and most simple you can do in city planning. It literally only takes concern. It doesn't take many money. And that's why I say that this kind of people-oriented city planning, you can apply also to the poor cities and to the big cities. And I will say that these methods, they are valid in all sizes of settlements, from many millions to small villages. As long as there is Homo sapiens living, we know how we can make a better time for them.
I hope I can be as optimistic as you are.
I've seen so much in my time that I do think that we can change the mindset and can have other values, especially when they are not expensive and they are not standing in the way of other things. It's just to put down your foot and say, walking is a human right and getting across the street is a human right. And you can bloody well make sure that that can happen in your city. That's the first step.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I hope everybody will get as optimistic as you are and we'll find a solution for the world. Let us now move to the next presentation. Professor Zhang Yuqing, former Deputy Director General of the National Energy Administration of China. Professor Zhang, the floor is yours. Professor Zhang?
你好，你好。
张教授，你打开视频了吗？
我打开视频了已经。
OK， 好的，可以了。
PPT 还没打开，这 PPT 我。
Just 1 minute. I'm going to show you my slides. Distinguished guests, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. At the invitation of the organizing committee of this event, I'm very delighted to be here today. I'm going to talk about China's policies and actions to achieve the goal of carbon peak and carbon neutrality. My presentation consists of 5 parts. Firstly, the goal of carbon peak and carbon neutrality represents the solemn commitment made by China to the rest of the world.
I'm sorry to interrupt. 张教授，你这边好像没有共享题目，需要我这边帮你共享吗
？Excuse me, could you please share your screen? Professor Zhang, could you please share your screen?
或者我这边。
I'm going to share the screen for you. Please go on with your presentation. Secondly, I would like to talk about the policies issued by the Central CPC Committee and the State Council. Thirdly, I'm going to talk about the policies issued by the state commissions. And I'm going to talk about the implementation plans issued at the provincial, municipality, and autonomous regions for carbon peak, and also some actions taken by some major enterprises for carbon peak and carbon neutrality. Firstly, I want to talk about the dual carbon goal, that is carbon peak and carbon neutrality. On September the 22nd, 2020, President Xi Jinping delivered an important speech at the general debate of the 17th United Nations General Assembly, saying that China will increase its nationally determined contributions, NDCs, adopt more powerful policies and measures, and strive for the carbon peak by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. We all know that it has taken more than 40 or even 70 years for most developed countries have gone from carbon peak to carbon neutrality. As a developing country, China's industrialization and new urbanization are under development. Its energy consumption will increase rapidly. It will take 10 years to achieve carbon peak and then 30 years to achieve carbon neutrality. It is fair to say that the task is very arduous. Meanwhile, it has demonstrated China's firm determination to actively respond to climate change and take a green and low carbon development path. It reflects China's initiative as a big country to respond to climate change. To realize our goals, I think it is a very solemn commitment made by China to the rest of the world. It's also going to be a broad and profound economic and social revolution, which can never be achieved easily. The CPC committee and the governments at all levels should take the initiative to make clear timetables, roadmaps, and construction drawings, and promote economic and social development on the basis of the efficient use of resources and green and low carbon development. It's necessary to do a good job in carbon peak and carbon neutrality in an overall and orderly manner. Publish the carbon peak action plan before 2030 as soon as possible. The whole nation shall work together, correct the campaign style carbon reduction, and new mechanisms shall be built to take the place of the old one. We must not only ensure the realization of the goals, but also ensure the safe supply of national energy. That is to say, we should pay attention to energy security on the one hand, and energy restructuring on the other hand. Secondly, I would like to talk about the policies issued by the Central CPC Committee and the State Council. The Central Committee of the Communist Party of China's document clearly pointed out that realizing carbon peak and carbon neutrality is a major strategic decision made by the Central Committee with Mr. Xi Jinping at its core in coordinating the domestic and international situations. And also you can see that carbon peak and carbon neutrality have been brought into the overall situation of economic and social development. Under these two goals, we are going to coordinate the domestic and international situations. It is an inevitable choice to solve the outstanding problems of resource and environmental constraints and realize the sustainable development of the Chinese nation. It is a solemn commitment to build a community of shared future for mankind. It is required to take green and low carbon development of energy as the key, speed up the formation of industrial structure, production mode, lifestyle, and spatial pattern that can save resources and protect the environment, and follow the high quality development path of ecological priority, green and low carbon, so as to ensure the timely realization of carbon peak and carbon neutrality. For example, the National Development Commission and the Ministry of Resources have already issued some policies, such as the opinions on the complete, accurate, and comprehensive implementation of the new development concept and doing a good job of carbon peak and carbon neutrality. And obviously, you can see that a lot of commissions in China, including the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, have also successfully issued the implementation plan of carbon peak in the industrial field, the guiding opinions on promoting the high quality development of iron and steel industry, and promoting the high quality development of petrochemical industry in the 10th five-year plan. The Ministry of Science and Technology and the Ministry of Transport, as well as the Ministry of Finance, have also issued their related policies and opinions. The Ministry of Education or the China Banking Regulatory Commission and the People's Bank of China also have launched related policies and tools to help us realize the goals. Fourthly, I would like to talk about the implementation plans issued at the provincial, municipal, and autonomous regions level for carbon peak. Here you can see many cities. Here you can see many cities have already issued their targets and also their goals. For example, Beijing stated that the development goals and tasks of the 14th five-year plan are as follows. The proportion of renewable energy consumption will reach over 14.4% in 2025 and about 25% in 2030, so as to ensure that the target of carbon peak before 2030 can be achieved on schedule. Here you can also see that Shanghai, Hebei, and Guangdong, they also have already issued they have already formulated their tasks, and also they have supported policies. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go into the details. If we really want to realize our carbon peak and carbon neutrality goals, some major companies have to take their own actions. I'm going to give you one example. You might have ever heard of the China's State Grid Company Limited, or the China Southern Power Grid Corporation, or Huaneng Group, together with Datang Group Company Limited. Those power companies have already formulated their own goals to realize carbon peak and carbon neutrality. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into the details. Here you can also see some energy groups. They also have their own implementation plans. Besides, China Petroleum Chemical Company or China Petroleum and Natural Gas Group, as well as China Offshore Oil Group, have already formulated their own plans. Some iron and steel companies like Angang, China Aluminum Group, or the Bao Steel Group have also formulated their own action plans or roadmaps. Automobile companies like Guangzhou Automobile Group, Great Wall Motor Company Limited also have launched their own plans. Besides, some internet-based companies like Alibaba, Huawei, or Tencent have already issued their plans. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Professor Zhang, thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry that we don't have time to go deeper in the very interesting slide that you have there and the many companies to which you were referring. We know that China is aiming to really lead the transformation in energy efficiency and low carbon economy. As you rightly said, towards the carbon peak and carbon neutrality, there are various policies. Many goals has been set, a variety of action plans have been elaborated. But can you give us, if possible, just 2 examples on actions, on real actions that cities have been doing? Would it be on the energy system and on the building sector, on how effectively they are reducing emissions and substantially that can effectively lead to carbon neutrality? Can you just give us a couple of examples of effective actions, not just goals?
I'm going to give you one simple example. To realize carbon peak or carbon neutrality, firstly, we need to enhance the utilization rate of the energy. Some research institutes or even the whole society have already aware that in the past, we have plans for the energy utilization. For example, we have power grid or power supply. They used to be separated from each other, but now we have taken an integrated approach. Cooling, heating, water resources can be regulated with some intelligent means or smart means. Besides, we can also know the demands of the users. We have the cross-boundary or cross-sector cooperation so as to enhance the energy efficiency. By doing so, we are able to realize our goals. That is one specific example.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Integrated approach and looking at the demand side in order to respond properly to the needs and effectively improve energy efficiency. Hopefully I will have a couple of minutes at the end so I can ask a last question to all of you. Let's now move to the next presentation. Zhu Xiaoxin, academician of Chinese Academy of Science and honorary president of China Electric Power Research Institute. We believe that we will have a video message.
Dear leaders, dear experts, today I'll talk about the challenges in developing flexibility and resilience in the next generation power system and how to deal with those challenges. So as you can see from this page, I'll cover 3 parts. The first part is about our strategic goals and pathways for energy transformation. The second and third parts are the key. The second part is about the performance requirements and the challenges in the new generation power system. And the third part is about a preliminary study of flexibility and climate resilience in system operation. The final part is a short summary. So President Xi Jinping announced the 30-60 dual carbon goals on behalf of China in September 2020. In March last year, China specified a key task in the 14th five-year plan, that is to build a clean, low-carbon, safe, and efficient energy system and a new generation power system dominated by new energy. In October 2022, the report of the 20th CPC National Congress proposed active and steady measures to achieve carbon peaking and carbon neutrality. According to the report, we got set up a new approach so that we can break the old approach. And we got to deepen the energy reform, speed up the planning and construction for a new generation energy system, whereby we can better ensure energy security. As for the pathways we have taken to build the country's new generation power system, I have identified 5 pathways. The first pathway is to deep and utilize new renewable energy, such as wind or solar, and form a power supply structure dominated by new energy. The second pathway is to promote the electrification of energy used at the terminal end. The fourth pathway is to promote the flexible transformation of coal-fired power and the development of CCUS technologies to promote the low carbon and zero carbon transformation of coal-fired power. So here you can see a scenario-based study of our country's power system development under the dual carbon goals. What's the point here? That is to see our future power system development has to be improved. We need to look at the proportion of new energy going forward. So between 2045 and 2050, we got to ensure PV and wind account for 50% of total power generation here in our country. That is a very high percentage. As for CO2 emissions, we have included that into this study. So between 2020 and 2060, we can define 3 stages. The first stage is between 2020 and 2030. That stage is for carbon peaking. So in that stage, we got to ensure carbon emissions from our power system and energy system can peak. Then the second stage, between 2030 and 2050, that is a key stage. In that stage, we hope we can work faster to reduce carbon So if we falter in that stage, then we could face a very hard time in terms of achieving carbon neutrality by 2060. So in the second stage, we got to really work faster to reduce emissions from, for example, coal-fired power, the power system, and the whole energy sector. So between 2050 and 2060, that is the final stage for reaching carbon neutrality. So now let me talk about the requirements of PV or solar and wind on the whole power system. Those requirements are fourfold. First, flexibility. Second, resilience. Third, stability. And then reliability and cost effectiveness. Those are the key requirements. Again, flexibility, resilience, reliability, stability, and cost effectiveness. So how can we ensure the power system has those features? Solar and wind could be intermittent. We also got to ensure the power system can adapt to that kind of intermittency so that solar and wind can account for a larger share of our energy mix. In June this year, China released the 2035 National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy. So in that strategy, we got to take measures to enhance our capabilities of adapting to climate change. That is to say, the whole economic system and our society got to be more resilient towards climate change. For that, we got to improve our infrastructure regarding water, energy, and of course, electricity. If we can have better infrastructure in those sectors, I'm sure our country will have a better time in the face of extreme weather. And here you can see our infrastructure plan for the 14th five-year plan period. That's released at the end of July. And in that, we could find some content regarding resilience of urban energy, especially urban electricity, and also some words about smart grids. Then let me present our preliminary study of the operating flexibility and climate resilience of the power system. We have proposed a concept known as comprehensive energy production unit. So in exploring energy transformation, we gotta combine existing coal-fired power with CO2 capture technologies. We gotta explore how we can get more power from renewables and how we can get power from hydrogen or even methane and methanol. We gotta construct a lot of new comprehensive energy production units. So this kind of unit should be able to handle different energy sources. Among different energy sources, there should be a lot of flexible adaptation and regulation. So you can see this diagram shows a coal-fired power plant. There is also a PV power station, and then there is a supporting CO2 capturing and separation facility. And then there is a device for making hydrogen from water. Hydrogen in that process is actually a product. We hope hydrogen can work with CO2 so that we can have a cleaner whole process. So when hydrogen reacts with CO2, there could be methane or methanol generated. Both materials can be used as fuel directly. They are also important chemical materials. So in the future, we're going to explore this kind of possibility of building the wonderful comprehensive energy production unit. We need to analyze the flexibility and adaptation. We can draw some curves to cover a 24-hour period So how much electricity can be generated from coal, how much from the solar, and how much from wind, and how we can integrate hydrogen, methane, and methanol in this equation. That really matters. We can have a whole day of 24 hours during which we can regulate the capacity of coal-fired power facilities. Maybe we can improve their efficiency and cut emissions. So here you could see we have facilities to generate and store methane. And methane is a promising and emerging fuel. So here we have proposed the concept of IEPU1. So IEPU is actually the formal term for the Comprehensive Energy Production Unit. We have different concepts or different generations regarding IEPU. We have IEPU1. In IEPU1, we have some basic setup, and in IEPU2, you can see we have made some improvements. We can base our analysis of the possibility of achieving our dual carbon goals on this model of IEPU2. For example, wind and solar can account for 71% of the total power generation. So, and that is still a small percentage. We got to ensure by 2050, the percentage can be even higher. In the interest of time, I cannot go too deep here. So the principle is quite clear. With the IEPU, we can really combine all the energy resources and achieve synergies among different energy sources. IEPU has very strong capabilities of regulating and coordinating among different energy sources. As you can see here, we have pumped water energy storage included in the whole equation. The regulation capacity could be somewhere between minus 300 million watts to positive 3 million kilowatts. So between minus 3 million kilowatts and positive 3 million kilowatts. So for the whole IEPU, the range could be even larger, between minus 3.76 million kilowatts and positive 5 million kilowatts. And the regulation really matters. We got to ensure energy can come in and also be utilized later. So the principle is simple, but the process may involve a lot of requirements, and also there could be a lot of constraints. We got to ensure we can handle the energy use peaks and valleys. As you can see here, with IEPU2, we can have a very good job in terms of regulating energy production and consumption during the whole day. So the evening, the night peak could be from 7 p.m. to 10 or 11 p.m. So during that peak, we can do some regulation to ensure that energy stored earlier can be used to meet the peak demand. So now let's look at some typical days and some normal days with normal weather. Look at this weekly curve. So you could see the curves of electricity from solar and power. During the first 3 days of the week, the weather is normal. So solar and wind can both generate a normal amount of electricity. For the next 3 days, we have some extreme weather. So during those days, PV or solar generates much less electricity. That's also the case for wind. However, we have the whole system for regulation and adaptation. Electricity generated earlier can be stored just for rainy days, shall I say. So as you can see, during the first 3 days, wind and power account for 47% of the total demand. It's very close to 50%. And then during the next 3 days, wind and solar account for a very small percentage. Actually, they have come to a stop in terms of power generation. However, the IUPU can do some regulation and adaptation. So in those 3 days of extreme weather, the total demand also fluctuates. As we can see from this week, the total demand drops by like 40%. So how can we ensure that demand can really be met?
The lack of power generated by wind power and solar power will supplement it, accounting for 70.5% of the total amount of electricity generated. This is still proposed by IUPU to play a big role. Well, let's summarize the discussion of flexibility and climate resilience. One is 2020 to 2060 China Power System Development Scenario Analysis shows that in 2025, non-fossil energy store capacity will account for more than 50% of the total installed power generation. In 35 years, wind and PV power generation installed will account for more than 50%. From 2050 to 2060, wind and PV power generation will account for about 70% of the store capacity, and the power generation account for 56% to 60%, which means a high proportion of renewable energy. Then, of course, a high proportion of renewable energy power system, it has a performance requirements. It must be flexible, resilient, stable, and also reliable. It's very important to pay attention to the demand of the system regulation and the demand of energy supply in normal and extreme weather, when the permeability of wind power and PV power generation is very high. Then the third point is to improve the climate resilience of the power system. In general, we need to build short-term, medium-term, and long-term energy storage, including cross-season energy storage systems with centralized and distributed layout, especially long-term energy storage, such as green hydrogen and derived green gas liquid fuels, methane, methanol, and ammonia. Long-term energy storage is very important if the climate is to be improved here. Fourthly, the role of IEPU is improving the flexibility and resilience of the power system. So what role does IEPU play? One, IEPU has the ability of large positive and negative two-way flexible adjustment. The improved system flexibility is very good. And the second one is that it's able to achieve large-scale space-time migration of energy. So what does that mean? If we put the excessive energy, especially PV power generation, in the first 3 days into hydrogen into methane, then in the case of extreme weather, we can use them in the next 3 days. But after 3 days, the energy may not be enough. But in fact, our usual accumulation, namely green fuel and hydrogen, if your store space is big enough, it can store more, then we can improve the power system under extreme weather because it has a very good resilience. So basically, under the extreme weather, it has good resilience. So that is my summary.
Thank you, Professor Zhu, for this presentation. Sorry, it was a recorded one, very rich presentation. I would have had interesting discussion around that, but since you are not with us, we will continue with next one. And it was very technical presentation, a lot of modeling and projections. After we reach the peak, how then you can look at the carbon neutrality projections. I hope China will have the capacity to implement all this in order to fulfill the policy objectives. Let's now move to the next presentation. So Mr. Tariq Mtaira, Director, Department of Energy, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO. Tariq, the floor is yours.
Good day and good morning, good afternoon to all of you, and thank you, Arab, for the introduction and for chairing this session. It's my great pleasure to join you at this 17th annual session of the Global Forum on Human Settlement. I would like to use the opportunity of my intervention not to speak just on the perspective from UNIDO, but from the perspective of the Council of Engineers for the Energy Transition seat, which is an independent advisory council to the United Nations Secretary General that was convened for the first time at COP27. And so this is an opportunity to share with you the call of action from the Council. So just to give you a context, the idea of the Council of Engineers is to bring together a diverse and global Council of Engineers and energy system experts to develop global and region-specific recommendations to accelerate the transition to low-carbon energy systems. So on these both at the city level and at the regional level and at the global level. The Council will work with other UN agencies, policymakers, and multilaterals institutions to ensure such recommendations are sustainable, just, and capable of supporting economic development and improved quality of life by providing access to reliable low-carbon energy systems and ensuring that positive effects on people's life and livelihood are created in that process, including through participatory means and the creation of new jobs in the broader clean energy sector and the clean energy transition agenda. So I'm gonna just take a bit of parts of that statement, and I think it's important to reiterate that statement because it's resonate well with our previous speakers, both what Professor Jan mentioned on the role of people and behavior, and Professor Jian Qin on the broader sort of technical solutions. So this is a call of action, both to take into consideration what do we have today in terms of socio-technical systems and their pathways to get us to net zero at different level of action, both at the cities and the government. So I'm reading from the statement: the world needs to move at a rapid pace and expanded scale to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, keep the Paris Agreement targets within reach, and mitigate the detrimental impact of climate change on all aspects of human life and environment. At the heart of the challenge and its solution is the deployment and use of energy systems, which currently produce almost 3/4 of the global greenhouse gas emissions, and are the backbone of the transition to a net zero global economy. While clean energy technologies, as we heard before, have expanded rapidly over the last decade, the vast majority, nearly 80% of today's primary energy is still supplied by fossil fuels. So to meaningfully transition to low carbon sources in the limited time remaining to meet the global challenge, the world must quickly deploy a variety of commercially available clean energy technologies, accelerate the development and deployment of emerging technologies, the kind of technologies we just listened to from Professor Xiaojing, and pursue research to develop additional innovative solutions. This must be done while also linking these technical solutions with policies that support a just and affordable energy transition that leaves no one behind. Reports have highlighted that a significant majority of the emission reduction required to reach net zero can be achieved with existing technologies, including both those already commercialized and ones in advanced stage of development. These technologies and new ones must be deployed to support emission reduction and adaptation while also ensuring universal access to clean, affordable, and modern energy services. In this process, the world must find solutions to several technical and non-technical barriers that currently hinder progress and development. Some challenges and opportunities are common across a wide swath of the globe, while others are regional in nature Example, the relative ability to finance the infrastructure required to accelerate the energy transition and or to ensure energy availability to all. So the finance and availability of cheap finance is a concern for a bigger part of the world that we are trying to influence the energy transition. In turn, solutions must acknowledge these regional differences to ensure reliability and affordability of energy services and to secure public acceptance of needed changes, including by ensuring that people are both protected from any potential negative impacts of the transition to net zero energy system and well placed to benefit from this transition. Nations, regions, and cities will achieve their individual milestone at different pace and adopt a mix of technologies that are situationally appropriate with the long-term aim to create equity across regions and with the contribution to the global net zero goals. And specifically on the key pathways, many clean, efficient, and smart technologies available today can be deployed on a large scale to reduce global emission, while simultaneously support progress toward universal access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy. There are several key tools that communities around the world can use to support pathways toward an affordable and reliable low-carbon energy systems, including the first is to reduce the energy intensity of the economy via policies and measures that leverage technologies, data, and digitalization in order to improve energy efficiency while supporting economic growth. So reduce the energy intensity, and that's we've heard from Professor Jan, through also even design elements that we can rethink how we behave and use energy at the end of the day. The second element is to electrify end users that currently rely on fossil fuel, and I think we have heard this again in the two previous sessions speaking. Electrify to the extent that is possible, building heating, cooking, and passenger vehicles while pursuing other decarbonization pathways, carbon management, low carbon fuels for end users that are harder to electrify, such as heavy industry and heavy transport. And thirdly, reducing the greenhouse gas emissions from energy supplies, transitioning to renewable energy, but also we know that there is nuclear and other low carbon primary energy sources across all sectors using multi-sectoral approaches. So these are the key pathways that the Council of Engineers has been looking at and advocating for. And finally, in closing, I wanted to highlight that the Council of Engineers offer and extend a hand to work with all partners to support the kind of knowledge that is relevant for decision making, both at the regional, but also at the local community level, but also at the interregional and global level, in terms of identifying best engineering and technology practices and pathways, leverage global expertise of the Council to enhance regional and global collaboration, and finally work together with other agencies and in-country stakeholders to identify priorities and roadmaps for these pathways at a more practical and operational level to serve countries and cities' needs. So this is an invitation from the Council of Engineers to work together, and also just the call to action. I wanted to bring it to the attention of the forum. And I think I would stop here and pass on back to you. Thank you very much.
Tarek, thank you very much. Thank you for using your two hats as UNIDO and Council of Engineers to inform us. You want us to work together, and this is exactly the first word on the title of this forum today: together for a shared third green urban future. So definitely the call is well received. Let me ask you a question, if you allow me, from both the Council of Engineers and from UNIDO perspective. We heard it from you, and we usually hear it everywhere, that we have the technologies we need. They exist if we want to really move towards a transition quickly. But we have technologies, but they are not implemented in most of the cases. So as an engineer, council of engineer, and an experienced person from UNIDO working in most of the countries, what do we need to first implement those technologies and scaling them in order to effectively have this right transition? And then after a brief reply, there is a question from one of the person attending the session. Can you reply to this first one, please?
No, thank you for the question. Indeed, we exactly had the same discussion just yesterday while we were analyzing the similar case on, for example, the deployment of electric mobility, a large-scale project in China that we've been working with for the last 10 years, and we just had exactly the same reflections on what stood in the way of large-scale adoptions. I mean, I think the mistake we have made as engineers and technologists is that we also been trying to push the technology. And that is always a problem if you push a technology in isolation, like a device, just the electric vehicle as it is. And we have to shift the thinking to what you call the socio-technical system. These technologies are embedded in a socio-economic human system, and then we have to transition the whole system. And I think this speaks very well to what Professor Jan was saying, is that, you know, you have to trigger behavior change as you bring technology to the table. You have to trigger also change in how economic reward and incentives work around this technology system, and also the broader, if you look at it from a global perspective, also the global role of trade in facilitating the adoption, trade regimes, financial, global finance. Take, for example, global finance. Until now, I mean, if you want to deploy the right kind of infrastructure in developing and least developing countries, particularly the poorer ones, they are penalized in the global finance system because they have to borrow at a higher rate than any other country, and because of their situation. So you have to reform multiple dimensions of the whole system, I think. So I think we need to move from a discrete technology perspective to a socio-technical logic in terms of pushing the change.
Thank you. A more integrated and systemic approach. The question from the one of the speakers just coming up, I know that people are asking, pushing me to go to next one. One of the speakers, Isabel Kumli, is asking you, what do you expect as decreased goals in energy consumption from the strongest consumers?
I mean, if I understand the question, looking at the demand side, I mean, the reduction of energy through energy efficiency and demand side management, we have an opportunity of reducing the demand by 30%. That is a tremendous opportunity. I mean, I think if we're talking about seriously about net zero by 2050, we have, particularly within the role of the energy system, we have been focusing on the supply side, but I think we need a shift of mind to the demand side, end use sectors, the way we use design products, the way we use products, the way we create circularity in material flows. So we have to shift the thinking. And by shifting the policy regime on the demand side, I think there is at least, we can solve 30 to 40% according to different scenarios, 30 to 40% of the emissions problem. If the question is on where are the low-hanging fruit, where are the, that was called the low-hanging fruit, where are the big ticket items in terms of addressing the emissions, and I think there are a few sectors where we really need to pay attention to, that we can do a lot by just how it's called a mission-oriented target around these sectors. I mean, if you take cement, fertilizers, steel, these structured commodities, if we have a global collaborations to decarbonize these quickly, I mean, because they are the hard ones as well, we can basically tackle 20% of the global emissions around these sectors.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tariq. Let's now move to the next presentation. UK renewed energy expert, academician of the Australian National Academy of Engineering, President, Clean Energy Research Institute, Southern University of Science and Technology in China.
Good. Can you see my screen?
We see you. The screen is still to come, I believe. If you
Okay,
have a
let me
PowerPoint.
just try to share one more time, so make sure you can see. You let me know if you see it or not. Did you see it?
It's coming. Yes, we do see it now. Please go ahead.
Good, good. So I guess I was told I can speak in Chinese, so you guys probably use simultaneous translation here.
As you wish. We do have
okay.
the translation.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the green methanol and green ammonia as one of those useful long-term energy storage approach. 好，
Dear experts, ladies and gentlemen, today I'll talk about how we can better store and transition energy. So wind and solar have been developing for many years. The best thing about that is that the costs have come down. In Ganzhou, Sichuan, 1 kilowatt hour only accounts for like 30 cents, give or take. Huawei has set up a PV power station in Saudi Arabia. The capacity is 1.3 gigakilowatts, and the cost could be down to 7 cents per kilowatt hour. That is 7 Chinese cents. If you talk about the US dollar terms, that's going to be 1 US cent. So in Baotou of Inner Mongolia, we have very good solar resources. And even in the best place for solar, we have like over 1,800 hours per year. So currently, I suppose the future of solar and wind is promising. The tariff of electricity from solar and wind is already very low. Maybe we can go down to 10 Chinese cents per kilowatt hour. So there is always a limit as for how low we can go in costs. We are generating a lot of electricity from wind and solar, but how we can store that electricity? Because we know that solar and wind are intermittent. Even in the best place for wind and solar, there is still a very high degree of intermittency. So in many places, there is other technologies of new energy, for example, pumped water energy storage and air compression technology. Those are actually for energy storage, but those technologies also have restrictions. The total amount of solar and wind could meet the global demand. However, when there is no solar, when there is no wind, what can we do? We got to ensure we have good methods for storing energy, not only over the short term, but also over the long term. So the auto industry has been around for over 100 years. There have been some signature brands in petrol cars and diesel cars. But now we are in the era of EVs or electric vehicles. However, the penetration of EVs is still not high enough. About 110 years ago, actually, we saw some battery vehicles. And then we had the golf carts. All those golf carts were powered by batteries. Those were lead acid batteries. But now in this new era of EVs, where are we heading? Can we ensure EVs become the future? In the beginning, humanity chose ICE cars or internal combustion engine cars because liquid could be the best carrier of energy. So look at this table, this graph. With a liquid, we have the best energy density. Over 100 years, we have spent a lot of money developing lithium batteries, but now the best lithium battery, for example, the blade lithium battery from BYD still has a very low energy density, maybe around 400. So with petrol, the energy density is 8,600 or even higher. With diesel, that number is even higher. So with wind and solar, the energy density is also very promising. Anyway, batteries have a very low energy density. In the early stage, humanity chose petrol as the energy for cars because of its high energy density. So we could do a lot of calculations on the fuels, and we can calculate the cost of producing energy and also shipping energy. Around the globe, there are not many places that are abundant in oil. However, human beings have been working hard to develop oil. That is because oil or petroleum is also really a very good way of storing energy. Yes, oil shipping may cost money, but even if we account for the money, oil is still a very good way of storing energy. In terms of energy density, oil outperforms batteries by a large margin. In ICE cars production, there has been a lot of brands and a lot of models. The same production line can produce numerous vehicles. And in developing battery-powered cars, things are trickier. Look at the costs of raw materials. Here you can see the cost of cobalt has increased almost 3 times over the past years. In developing EVs, we got to ensure a lot of collaboration. First, we got to ensure electricity that powers EVs is clean. So if we generate dirty electricity from coal, how can we say EVs are clean? If we can generate enough electricity from wind, solar, methane, or some other method for EVs, then EVs are really clean. Hydrogen is also a keyword. In 2018, Premier Li Keqiang visited the factory of Toyota for making hydrogen cars. So back then, there were many rumors that China would develop hydrogen cars. With oil, it's always about burning oil to power cars. Efficiency could be very low. The energy transfer efficiency in burning oil to power cars is very low. In hydrogen cars, things are much different. Energy efficiency is much higher. So with hydrogen to power cars, we got to develop hydrogen fuel cells. Over the past 1 or 2 decades, the US, Japan, and Europe have spent maybe billions of US dollars on hydrogen energy. However, if you look at the possibilities of choosing carriers of energy, the hydrogen gas is not a good option. In the form of a gas, the energy density from hydrogen is very, very low. Also, as a gas, the hydrogen gas could leak very easily. If you shoot a bullet onto the hydrogen tank in a car, there could be an explosion. So storing hydrogen gas in the vehicle is a very bad option. We gotta have better methods for storing hydrogen. As a gas, hydrogen gas could be very expensive to transport. we gotta have a very strong materials and a very strong cylinders to store and transport hydrogen. Because of the nature, because hydrogen gas explodes very easily, hydrogen stations must occupy a very large area. Investments in this kind of infrastructure could be too expensive. If hydrogen stations are far from urban centers, then drivers of hydrogen cars will have to drive a long distance to have their cars refueled. That's a very bad option. So what about methane? Methane has been mentioned in many cases as a new form of energy. We can perform hydrolysis on water to get hydrogen, and hydrogen could react with CO2 to generate methane. You can look at the details here.
Today, if we use trucks to transport the hydrogen, it will be very difficult. For example, we can only transport 250 kilograms of the hydrogen with a heavy truck. So it's actually very difficult to transport the hydrogen with heavy trucks. For instance, if you want to transport hydrogen from Inner Mongolia or from the Xinjiang province, it's really very difficult to do so. So what can we do? Maybe we can change hydrogen into liquid. Then we can transport that with pipeline, or we can even transport that with trains. Then we are able to make full use of methanol. We can actually integrate methanol with hydrogen to make it into liquid. In China, we have many factories producing methanol in China. However, the heat value is only half of diesel and gasoline. However, methanol will actually emit much carbon dioxide. That is to say, we need to, on the other hand, we should also add carbon dioxide into the production of methanol. And also, in China, you can see China is lacking in oil. So we can reduce our dependence on oil by using and producing methanol. Guiyang, a city in the west of China, has become a city with the most successful and largest scale of the utilization of methanol and methanol vehicle. If we actually use methanol in the taxis, then we can save much gasoline and diesel. Besides, the price of methanol is quite reasonable. So we are able to promote the utilization of methanol in public transportation. So I actually propose a very important solution. That is, we need to produce green methanol. So that is to say, we can produce green methanol with green power, because methanol can also use the long-term storage technology. On the one hand, it is safer. On the other hand, it's easier to store. At the same time, we can also separate the air in the air factory. For example, when we produce methanol, we can actually make full use of the 3.5 tons of carbon dioxide. It calls for much investment. It will also consume much energy. So it is very important for us to recover the oxygen during the production of methanol. Therefore, we need cutting-edge technology to deal with that. So I think gasification is actually one of the solutions we can have. And also we can use electrolysis of the water, change all the carbon into the green methanol. Comparatively speaking, we are able to reduce the emission of carbon dioxide because we're using carbon dioxide in our production. Hydrogen and oxygen comes from the green power. So theoretically, we're able to reduce 75%. We're able to reduce 75% of the carbon. So with green methanol, we're able to actually fuel our cars. What about green ammonia? Green ammonia cannot be used in the underground garage because it's a little bit dangerous. And if the place is very sensitive to odor, then ammonia cannot be used. So in the future, I think we can build infrastructure on the basis of the green methanol. And then we're able to develop the third generation of the cars. The first generation of the cars is fueled by the internal combustion engine. The next one is fueled by hydrogen. Then we can also make the cars fueled by green methanol. So 1 liter of methanol can produce a large amount of gas. So in 2019, here you can see there is a report from the Science and Technology Daily. Besides, I was invited to some TV shows telling the Chinese audience how we're able to make full use of methanol. And we believe that methanol is going to be an important carrier of the fields. So the infrastructure for methanol cars, we can also be used for other vehicles, including vehicles powered by diesel, powered by gasoline. So we don't need to build any new gas station. It's actually very easy for us to convert the existing infrastructure into the methanol infrastructure. But it's very difficult to do so in an opposite direction. So we are able to convert the existing charging stations into the methanol charging stations. So we're able to make our contribution to carbon neutrality and carbon peak. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much for this very rich and very technical presentation that shows that research is moving, brains are working to find solutions for the transition in the future, but there is still a lot to be done, and I hope that you will be able to implement all this. Unfortunately, time is running out. I will not take the luxury of asking you a question, since we still have a final presentation by Marco Lambertini, Director General, WWF International. Can you please play his video?
We're living in extraordinary times, and you could even say that we are living a paradox. On one hand, we have overwhelming evidence of our impact on the planet. Science has never been clearer. The natural world is in crisis. Major Earth systems, entire ecosystems are rapidly heading towards tipping point. Globally, from coral reefs to polar ice sheets and glacier systems, regionally, entire ecoregions like the Amazon or Southeast Asian forests. From seasonal monsoon to the Atlantic Gulf Stream, still systems that are crucial in regulating climate and rainfall patterns at local and global levels are being heavily destabilized. In a business as usual scenario, their state will change, and it may take centuries, millennia to recover, maybe never. If this happens, the planet will look and their systems will behave very differently from today. And most life on Earth, including our own species, will face huge challenges in adapting and surviving to extreme conditions and unpredictable patterns. In fact, We are impacting the very systems that in the last 10,000 years have given stability to the biosphere, enabling life in our own civilization to thrive. And as the working group of two of the IPCC Sixth Assessment Report points out, climate risks are compounded by the scale, reach, and complexity of contemporary urbanization. On the other hand, awareness has never been greater, and not only of the impact we are having on the planet, but also of the consequences this is having and will increasingly have on our lives, our economy, society, our health, our overall well-being. The COVID pandemic has also grown in many of us, most of us, a new awareness of our vulnerabilities, challenging our delusional idea that we can continue to dominate the natural world irresponsibly, take nature for granted, exploit its resources wastefully and unsustainably without consequences. Today we know that there are consequences. Some of them are already here. Loss of lives and economic assets from extreme weather, aggravated poverty from droughts, zoonotic pandemics able to bring the whole world to its knees. This is a huge perception shift, a cultural revolution. Nature loss is not only perceived as a moral or an ecological issue, but also an economic, development, human health issue, and also a justice issue, as the most vulnerable populations are the most affected, and even an intergenerational justice issue, as we are leaving a terribly complicated legacy to our children, their children, and future generations to come. I would like to think that the tension between the state of the planet, ever-growing human pressures, and our awareness and readiness to respond is a sign and also the foundation for a society in transition. A society is its greatest fork in the road, a turning point, and facing its deepest system change challenge around what is perhaps the most existential of all our relationships, the one with nature, our mother, our home, our lifeline. We have already started our transition towards a low-carbon economy, not as fast as needed, of course. The disappointing outcomes of COP27 are yet another example. But we are transitioning, inspired by science and an agreed global goal on climate, to become a carbon-neutral society by mid-century. That has translated into a clear and measurable global goal of net zero emissions by 2050. This is today our global compass to fight climate change. We need similar clarity for nature biodiversity, the other side of today's ecological crisis. Net zero emissions by 2050 and net positive biodiversity by 2030. And this is why I'm so pleased at the theme of this 17th Global Forum on Human Settlements. Climate and nature, the two interconnected sides of our existential challenge. Carbon neutral and nature positive, the two interdependent global goals for climate and nature. Together, they represent the double compass to guide us towards a safe future for humanity, to shift to a sustainable development model, to support the delivery of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Nature positive, in simple terms, means more nature, more natural forest, more fish in the ocean and river systems, more pollinators in our farmland, more soil biodiversity. And from these examples, are immediately apparent the benefits that a nature-positive goal will bring to climate, food, water security, and to human economy and well-being. Net zero loss for nature is not enough, simply because we have lost so much nature and biodiversity and weakened the resilience and productivity of many ecosystems, but also because nature can come back if given a chance. To become nature-positive, we need to halt and reverse nature loss by first, conserving more of the nature left on the planet. Second, restoring what is possible. And third, managing sustainably the rest. In December, in Montreal, we have the unmissable opportunity to codify nature positive as the global goal for nature under the UN Convention on Biological Diversity and the Global Biodiversity Framework that is expected to be adopted there. This is key to mobilize and align governments, businesses, financial institutions, even consumers, towards contributing to the global goal for nature, inspiring a whole of society approach, and injecting a high degree of accountability at the same time, exactly as we're witnessing for climate. Like the global goal of carbon neutral by 2050 has disrupted the energy sector, propelling investment away from fossil fuel and towards renewable energy, nature positive by 2030 is set to disrupt the other economic sectors that today are drivers of nature loss. The big five: agriculture, fishing, forestry, infrastructure, extractives. Cities can contribute to nature-positive goal in powerful ways, directly by hosting more green spaces and biodiversity, which we also know mitigates heat waves and support immensely the physical and mental health of citizens, and indirectly by shifting to procurement and consumption patterns that support nature-positive transitions in our production systems, from the energy we buy, the food we eat, and the many commodities we use. Now we have the opportunity and the responsibility to translate this new awareness into action. Transitioning to a carbon neutral and a nature-positive society and economy is the only path to a safer and more equitable future for humanity. Finally, understanding that in fact, we depend on nature much more than nature depends on us. I sincerely hope the cities will fulfill their incredible potential to making these goals a reality.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry that we don't have Marco with us. I believe that he should be in Montreal at COP15, and it would have been interesting to ask him a question on how things are going there. Christine, do I have 3-4 minutes, or you want to jump to the next session?
Okay, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, it's not for me. I just want to ask one question, which is related to the last sentence of the title of the conference, having carbon neutral and nature positive cities. So nature positive cities. And I would like to ask the same question to the panelists who are still with us, Professor Jan. I know Mr. Zhang left, Tarek and Liu. If you are to give an advice to a mayor of a medium city, not look at the big city without big challenges, what would you recommend him as an action that can really deliver on nature positive cities, something that is realistic, feasible, and that can be scaled up to have nature positive cities? Professor Jan, if you can start. 1 minute each, please.
I don't have any advice for that, but I have mentioned that a very good policy for every city of every size is to upgrade the concern for people doing their daily chores, especially for the people walking, for the people bicycling, for public life. That will in itself be very nature friendly, because that's what we were made for. And that could be a very good thing to be part of a policy for every city. Furthermore, it's very cheap.
Thank you very much. Tarek?
I think, to quickly respond to this, I think every city has fundamental infrastructure that it can always look to that infrastructure to create synergies and opportunities for nature. I mean, I've been traveling quite extensively in developing country cities, and I see, for example, waste management is just being dumped. I mean, basically landfilling. I mean, the simplest opportunity to create net gains is to find ways to close that cycle and create opportunities and business models with the private sector, public-private partnerships to create circularity around waste streams, around heat streams, around industry-urban symbiosis. There's the suite of solutions are immense, and I think it requires will and the mayors and the city government expand the partnership and engage with the citizens and the businesses around solutions, not to see that they have to do the solutions themselves all the time, because I know that cities are constrained with their capital expenditure budgets, with their financing. So create a framework for public-private partnership to create these synergies and closing what I call the loops around critical infrastructure, water, energy, waste. These are low-hanging fruits for cities.
Thank you very much. Mr. Liu.
Well, I don't think there's any easy solution. In today, we have to be practical, right? If you don't like nuclear, you keep some coal. If you don't like coal, you keep some nuclear, because just solar wind will not be enough. And the energy storage costs are still sky high. So let's better be practical. Of course, different cities, different ways there, but I think, of course, we should try to maximize the solar and the wind. And again, the limiting factor is the energy storage. So you got to have fun turning power to X, turning solar or wind into some green liquid. They use today's liquid infrastructure. Either this liquid is methanol or ammonia or power to X, or in the future, maybe like green ethanol. You got to have to go this way. Otherwise, wind, the solar, just the time is small percentage. You only have like, wind, solar is less than 20%. Wind is around 20% of time. 80% of time you don't have there. Once you want storage, the price is too high.
Thank you very much. So together with the existing technologies and knowledge and good willingness, together we can make it. I would put it this way, with all the optimism we have heard, and from Jan, from Tariq, from you, from Zhang, and so on. So together we can make it. Thank you very much. And thank you really for your time for this session and for the very informative session we have had, all the knowledge that we shared with us. And I now pass it over to the next session. Thank you again, colleagues, and we remain connected. Christine, back to you.
Fantastic.